All right. Hello, everyone. It's Shannon Port. And I'm sorry, it took me just a little bit longer to get here today. Um, there's just so much energy right now. I am so happy to be here. This is Shannon Port, divine feminine astrologer and teacher of the feminine mysteries. And we are here today live for the Aries full supermoon. And oh, so nice to see you, Trish. Oh, so nice to have you, the first one here. I just want to say at the beginning, I'm first of all, I'm happy to be here as always. I have a lot of different things that I'm going to put in, even though this won't be. I Somebody has to stop me if I go over an hour. I want to really keep this lower in time, and maybe even shorter than that. But I do have a lot to get to. There's a lot of energy on the planet. First and foremost, I want to announce that I am so excited. Hi, Carol. I am so excited today to announce that I have the link to the new upcoming course, which is called Goddess Ritual. And the theme is feminine crucifixion, holy descent of Inanna. The holy descent of Inanna. So it's an 8-week course, and I was so excited. I put it's linked in the video in the description box. And before I even came on today, I saw that there's people already signing up for it. And I hadn't even announced it yet or came on. So some of you must have come here and found it in the description box. The link to the 8-week course, which is starting on Samhain on October 31st, is in the description box. I'll also be posting it on Instagram. And if you're in on my newsletter or my email list, I'll be sending it out also. So you'll have the full page to look at. And so this course, we're in the energy of it already. It's at the end of October. It will start with a 1-hour ceremony right on Samhain on All Hallows Eve. The timing of it is one of the most auspicious of anything that I have ever taught here. Just the way it came in, the dates that were given, it's going to be 8 Fridays in a row. So the first full session will be on Friday, November 1st, which is All Saints Day, or it's still in the window of Samhain. And this is the Celtic pagan New Year. And so we've been working with holy paganism, or what you would call the solar feminine Christ religion. The religion of the goddess that is linked with the Christic energy, because we work very powerfully with that here. You know that my tradition and my formal education, my classical studies have come out of the Christic mysteries. And are deeply, deeply, deeply personified in the work we do here. So then it will go 8 Fridays, and the final day is winter solstice eve. And so it's magical. We are going to be working with the dark feminine. So I've taught Inanna before, but this will be Kabbalistic, fully Kabbalistic. I call it Goddess Kabbalah. And so we work with Kabbalah with everything we do here, but this is going to be a really, really sacred revealing of some of the most holy feminine Kabbalah codes. And so that apply to Inanna and her holy descent. You can read all about it in the page that is linked in the description box. And so let me just see if there's anything else I want to say. If Fridays are a busy day, and I know that, especially if you have a family, if you have kids, if you're young, and if you're going out, just know that as of right now, I'm looking at 3 p.m. Eastern time on Fridays. If you can't make it live, of course you will receive the recording right away. I may work with going a little bit earlier on Fridays, but then, and also if you have kids and you have to be out on Halloween and you can't be there, it will just be the introduction, and you will have a chance to look at it before we do the first formal session on Friday. regardless if you can be there live or not, I feel like this is one of the most powerful courses that I've ever done. It's very accessible. It's 8 weeks. And I put it up at a pre-sale price, which is a it's really, really, really at a good place for everyone. And so let me just see if there's anything else to say about that. Well, today we're going to talk about Inanna and the feminine Mars mystery. So we associate Inanna with Venus, as she is the solar goddess. And we associate her with Mars. Inanna was known as the goddess of war. She's also the goddess of music and many, many things. We work with her here. We'll be working with her, and we're going to talk about this today for the Aries full supermoon, as the goddess of deep feminine power, knowledge, discernment, intuition, and the holy radiance. Even you could say the holy radiance of the Mother Mary, of the great goddess. And so there, I wrote a lot on the page. You can read all about it. Make sure to check it out in the description box below. The other thing is that I have been time stamping the videos. If you haven't seen the last video that we did for the High Priestess and the Empress archetypes, which are some of the foundational work here, it is now time stamped. I think now I have it written as the Feminine Mysteries. It's the last video we did. And if you have not seen the Lilith Mysteries, that was the video before that. Everything is timestamped so you can go through and see what's in the video. We will be working with the High Priestess and the Empress very deeply in this coming course. And so the Art of the Feminine platform is built deeply with Kabbalah, astrology, the tarot, and alchemy. And so this is going to be the full representation of this work, the full synthesis as it corresponds to the divine feminine awakening at this time for light body woman. And so, all right, I'm just going to read one thing. I just got a testimonial from someone who's in my school right now. And so just because I just talked about the course, I just opened my email and got this, and I asked her if I could share it because it really, really touched me. And so I'm going to read this testimonial. This is from someone who is actually in light body yoga right now, and she sent this to me. So I want to share it with you because she says a lot of nice things about me, which I'm very grateful for. But it's not about that. When you get that kind of feedback from someone who's studying the work that you're putting out, it's so validating because so many years and so much time and so much sacrifice goes into putting it out. And then like anything, it still feels good to hear that. It's really, really touching people. So here's the testimonial, and then we'll get right into the Inanna and the Feminine Mars Mysteries. Dear Shannon, I love this work so much. Capital SO and 3 exclamation points. It is some of the most powerful information, energy, and teachings I have ever experienced. I just started the 4th week on the heart. She's in light body yoga. And I love what you are saying so much. All of what you are saying is so perfect for where I am at on my path, my energetic alignment, my healing of my feminine wounds, and my understanding of my spiritual essence and my spiritual journey. And what you are sharing is connecting me with my highest energetic being. Your energy is so beautiful, pure, clear, and true. And I am rising higher and becoming energetically more radiant, clear, and grounded at the same time, each time I listen. I'm going to listen to each one again when I've listened to all of them and write down as much as I can. I am honestly so blown away by your light, your wisdom, and your ability to teach these incredibly profound and multi-layered concepts and truths. Thank you, Shannon. What an incredible gift. I appreciate you beyond words, and I'm sending you love, light, and blessings. That's a really, really beautiful, just feedback. And she said a lot of nice things about me, which I do appreciate, but it's not about that. It's just, I wanted to share with you the energy that comes out of it. I also want to say that she said, I'm going to go back and I'm going to listen to each one, and then I'm going to go back and write down as much as I can. And so I also just heard from another woman who was in light body yoga, who said, she said, I've studied for years with so many different spiritual teachings and platforms. And she said, I'm only on the second week and I've never written so much in my life. She's like, I'm listening to it and I can't stop writing down everything you're saying. So this is just a testimony also for the school, because the school, this is only one course in the school, and there's about, there's many, many, many. And so and there's many. All right. So let's see where we're going to go from here. Okay, I'm going to take a look down. There's a lot of energy today, and then I'm going to talk about the astrology on the planet right now, because we are in massive transformation and changes. We're 20 some days out to the election in the US, and I have a lot to say. So I'm just going to peek down and say hi, and then we'll go right into that. All right. Got in my red for Inanna. Okay, and Mars. Okay, so I'm just gonna see who's on today. Make sure to say hi. Let me know where you're tuning in from. And okay, Livity Rising. I saw that. I saw you're already in the course. Diana, so nice to see you. And Vess, so nice to see you. I saw you on Instagram. Hi, Stephanie in LA. Oh, it's so great to be here today with you, Beyond Vess Maria. Kath P, sending you so much love. Martha, love from Wales, and Maria. And Cheryl. Hi, Cheryl in California. Okay, so, all right. I am before me. I am behind me. I am at my left. I am at my right. I am above me. I am below me. I am unto me. I'm taking a deep breath in. I am. I am. I know I am. I am. I am. I know I am. This is the solar Venus prayer, and it's also the prayer of Inanna when we say, I am below me. I am below me is Inanna's descent into the underworld, and that's claiming the dark feminine. It's claiming the dark mother, and it's also, we've been talking about Lilith with Lilith and the feminine polarity in the archetype of creation. The archetype of creation is like a battery, and we have the positive end and the negative end, and these two poles of creation have to be connected. That's why Inanna is also associated with 8. We're going to be working a lot with 8 in this upcoming course. It's for 8 weeks, 8 Fridays, Friday being the day of Venus. And so in the Lilith videos, we're talking a lot about the reclaiming of the dark feminine, and we'll talk about that today in the Mars mysteries. So for the feminine. So, okay. What I would like to say is that the energy on our planet right now is getting ready for major, major shifting. The last time there's been a lot of shifts. Right now, the Aries full supermoon, we're going to go right into the chart for that right after I say this overall feminine energy update for the planet. So it was the Saturn Pluto conjunction, I believe, Saturn Pluto conjunction in January 2020 that came right before the pandemic hit. And that was a time of major, major impact on the global stage and also for the US. Now, we also had the Pluto return for the US, which happened in February 22, and we're still in an ongoing process with that. Pluto is the underworld, Pluto is karma. So is Saturn and so is Mars, but Pluto enforces lessons and it enforces confrontation with power, integration with power, and the responsibility for how we use our own power. In the feminine Mars mysteries, we're going to be talking about reclaiming power for the feminine. On this planet right now, I talked about this last week in the last video we did, which was actually at the Libra solar eclipse, by the way, which was a huge energy, and it was following the lunar eclipse in Pisces. Feminine power is, I talked about how there's never been a greater battle for male power. All the factions are fighting right now for the technology, for the minds and souls of the women, the collective woman, and the collective feminine. Why? Because all masculine energy is inert without the adoration or the praise or even the anger of the feminine. The feminine moves matter. Her Shakti body moves matter. Her feelings move matter. She can consent. She can resent. She can sabotage herself, or she can go deep and she can reclaim the Mars force in her auric field so that she has power, she has her agency. It's really important with the feminine. I'm speaking for women, I'm also speaking for the feminine that exists in every single human soul. It's really important that we have our compassion, we have our beauty, our gentleness, our warmth, and our nurturing and our mothering and our creative ability. But without the integration of power for the woman, it can still be used very beautifully, but the final integration in the feminine will be coming into true feminine power. This is what our descent, our holy descent of Inanna is about. It's about reclaiming the synthesis of the mother, the cosmic mother and the earth mother, and even the subconscious mother. On the planet right now, there are more places where women are completely stripped of any rights, any agency, any ability to express their beauty, their sexuality, their work in the world, whether it's political work or cultural work, to take part in what is happening in the world, to be heard with a female voice. And so it's really important right now. Things are uncertain right now. And even with the election coming up, things, when I look into it, we're at a place of uncertainty and things could go, there's a few different ways that things could go. And the way things go will have a big effect on the collective feminine wounds on our planet. So let's look at what's happening right now. Okay, which should I say first? So Mars, I'll talk about the Mars retrograde because the Mars retrograde is going to be very significant. So it's right now, I'm recording this live, we're on the 16th, the day of the tower. And the full super moon in Aries is tomorrow. Now we're just finishing a 6-month cycle. The total solar eclipse in Aries that was on April 8th, that was a huge energy. And we actually did a video called Mars and the Mother Mary Mysteries. And it's in the Esoteric Feminine Codes on this channel. It is packed. It was like a 3-hour lecture, I believe. And it's time stamped. We did that for the total solar eclipse within Aries. So now we're 6 months later, we are at the full moon, and that was a new moon in Aries. So we've gone the cycle. Now we're at the full moon in Aries. So this is a completion of that cycle that we started back in April, and the energy is really big. Mars, the ruler of Aries, will be going retrograde starting December 6th. It will start in the sign Leo, a fiery sign of the heart, and it will go deep into the sign Cancer, the sign of the mother. Mars is going to go into the sign of the mother and deep into the underbelly and the subconscious mind of humanity. Now, Cancer is also the sign of the mother, and so it's going to Mars is forced to go inward, but it can also create tension when it goes inward. This will be happening at the same time we have Pluto moving from the last degree of Capricorn, completing that cycle of initiation, that patriarchal initiation that we've been under for many, many years. And Pluto will now be entering Aquarius and not going back in. So this is these energies together. Pluto moving forward. We're entering the age of Aquarius. It's going to start a whole new cycle with technology, with power struggles. Pluto is pure power with death and regeneration. Pluto entering Aquarius and the age of Aquarius is going to really, really bring a lot of energy to this world and to our we work with the feminine energy body of the goddess by resurrecting the zodiac and doing the alchemy of these signs. So Pluto will be really, really influencing the global stage. Pluto can also be war. It can be it's power struggles, but it's also wisdom. It represents the wisdom of regeneration, the arcane wisdom. And it's also sexuality because it rules Scorpio, which is the sign of sexuality, the dragon current. And so Pluto will be also activating that energy in Aquarius. So then we also have the North Node transiting from Mars, from Pisces, into the deep, deep, subconscious, watery, emotional, oftentimes carrying the victim energy of Pisces. All of this happening at once. Let me see if I'm in. And then Mercury will go retrograde in November too. Mercury will go retrograde after the US election, which could bring a lot of, it will redoing, recounting, all those things that we've been seeing a lot of lately. Make no mistake, all of these things are going to really, really impact the collective consciousness. It's one of the reasons why we start the Inanna course on November 1st. The election is just a few days later. We are going to be doing Inanna's Holy Descent at what could be a really, really, it could be a confusing time. It could be a time of victory. Who knows? We don't exactly know what's going to happen, but there's many different things. Let me just see if I can look in and see something for a moment. It's just uncertain. It's uncertain. There's so many things that are happening on the side of both candidates. There's so many layers happening in each political party right now where there's even disagreement within parties. And so the energy's on for all of us. It's on for all of us. The big one is going to be that the transiting North Node enters Pisces right as the new leader is sworn in the US in January, right at the same time. We'll be going from a fiery Mars energy to a deep Neptune energy. Neptune is deception, confusion, addiction, but Neptune can really make people uncertain. It can make things feel unclear, and it can be used to deceive. It's also highly spiritual. So I'm going to just look at the chart of the moon really quick, and then I'll tell you what we're going to do. We'll look at the chart of the Aries full moon, which is tomorrow, how that's impacting everything. And then I have two stories to tell that have to do with the feminine Mars mysteries. One is about the Emperor's forbidden kingdom, and one is about epigenetics and how it affects our birth that takes place in the womb of woman. So let's look at the Aries full moon really quick and see what's going on. So the Aries full moon is at 24 degrees of Aries, with the sun at 24 degrees of Libra. In the Libra solar eclipse, we talked a lot. Libra is a highly, highly esoteric sign. Aries is the sign of Mars, and I actually am gonna do a little bit of a channeling on the law of correspondence in just a moment about the Aries and the Emperor archetype. There's a lot of retrograde energy. Okay, Uranus is retrograde at 26 degrees of Taurus, Jupiter retrograde 21 degrees Gemini, Mars at 22 degrees in Cancer. So Mars is in the sign of Cancer too. So Mars in Cancer goes really deep. And Mars in Cancer can really, really connect to the wisdom of the subconscious mind, but it can also feel threatened by being surrounded by too much feminine energy and water because it's a fire planet. Lilith is in Libra at 17 degrees, pretty close to the sun. At least I think it's 17 degrees. Shez, if you're on here, you're the Lilith expert. You always seem to know exactly where she's at, all of her aspects. Mercury, oh, this is big. I wanted to say this. Mercury is in Scorpio at 5 degrees. Deep. That's a deep place for Mercury. And Venus is also in Scorpio at 29 degrees. That degree of initiation, the final degree of Scorpio, Venus is there at this full supermoon in Aries, which feels really significant. Venus completing her transit of Scorpio right at the full moon. Okay, so let's see if there's Venus and Scorpio really represent Venus and Mercury. Mercury is the mind, and Venus is the heart. And so we have the mind and heart in Scorpio. That's the sign of Pluto. Pluto is getting ready to move from Capricorn to Aquarius. So the Pluto energy is really on, especially after Venus just transited the sign of Scorpio. Okay. All right. I'm going to tell these stories, and then we're going to look at the feminine Mars mysteries and talk a little bit about Inanna. I actually have a written goddess report. Let me just make sure. Oh my God, I had so much going. I'm on the West Coast now, and so my timing for coming on is so different. I have 3 hours less time to get here, and there's always so many things to do. Okay, I have a goddess report here that I'll read, the channeled goddess report. So, all right, let me see. I know I wrote this down where I have. Okay. So we're going to talk about the Emperor's Forbidden Kingdom. And then we're going to talk about Golgotha after. All right. And the correspondence with Aries. Okay, so I've heard this story before, but when I was researching for Mars, when I was just getting together my work in the past couple weeks, I looked up this story and I found it on the South China Morning Post, and there was a really good blog post about the Emperor's Forbidden Kingdom. I'm just going to see if I have it. I thought I wrote out the details, but it's really powerful, having to do with feminine power. All right. Okay. Looks like I'm going to have to remember it. I know I wrote it down. Oh, here it is. The Forbidden City. All right. So now, and I've heard this story before. We're going to talk about the Emperor's Forbidden City. The Emperor is the Mars archetype. And in the Tarot, the Emperor is the sign of Aries. And so that's why I was looking up for the Emperor. And I discovered a part of the story that I did not realize before. So at this time, the time of the Forbidden City, the Emperor had called in from all over the land consorts and kept these consorts, young women, in this Forbidden City, in the court, specifically for the Emperor. Now, this corresponds to many things that still go on today. We could go on and on about this. But to be chosen as a consort for the emperor was like being chosen the winner of a of a beauty pageant. You were screened so thoroughly. You were screened for your beauty. You were screened for perfection of your physical form. You were screened for your health, your genetic lineage, how well spoken you were, even your education. In other words, the emperor wanted the most pristine and beautiful, very young consorts to be at his disposal. They would all come and live in the court so that he had access to satisfy and satiate his pleasures anytime by this whole harem, not even a harem, because these women weren't even connected to him in any way. There was no marriage involved. It was purely for pleasure. Now, we talked about in the last video how Mars, the fallen Mars force, is the fall of Eros, sexual desire, and war. So when Mars falls, it becomes purely carnal. And so we have the correspondence between the emperor in the tarot and the emperor's forbidden city, how the emperor uses the feminine. Now, these women would leave their homes, and oftentimes their own parents would give them, it was like considered an honor to be one of the emperor's, chosen consorts or concubines. And so, and then also the families would receive favors if they gave up their beautiful daughters. So these women were used for their beauty and their sexuality without love and without any kind of commitment. They were there to supply their beauty, supply their body, but without any true inner fulfillment of love. This is important because we've been talking about holy relationships. We've been talking about Eve's broken heart in the underworld, and we've been talking about feminine energy and the feminine energy body. And so these women were often, this is how the story goes, these women oftentimes died very young of what seemed to be natural causes. And so later, it was found out that they had died of liver disease. And this is a part of the story that I've known for quite some time, but the next part of the story is what I didn't have any access to. I just discovered it written on this post. The women died young, and when they found out, they were all dying from liver disease. Now, in metaphysics and in mysticism, the liver corresponds to rage. But it's a kind of rage that's turned inward. It's a kind of rage that cannot be expressed. Instead, these women have to keep up their appearances. And on one level, on the level of their ego, it's very, and I don't even mean the negative ego, it's very gratifying. It's a high status, just like the Vestal virgins had a very high status to be pristine and pure. They were used in a different way, not for actual satiation of the appetites, but to have their energy fields protect Rome and Greece and other kingdoms as well. So, and we talked about how that is a very powerful archetype and very real and also noble. There's a strong nobility about that, even having the deep spiritual understanding that the feminine and the pristine feminine carries that energy. But it was also used in a way that programmed the feminine against her own nature and holy womanhood. So these women died young and they were dying of liver disease. There was no reason that when you see it over and over, you realize that it was the lack of genuine love and fulfillment of what it means to truly come into union. Now, we say that when a woman gives of her force, and a man too, in intimacy without love, she is completely depleted. This is an esoteric code that we work with in Light Body Woman. We talked about it a lot in the Art of the Feminine podcast. She's depleted. Even though the momentary pleasure and the high feels good, when there's not some form of deep love or friendship or acknowledgement. Now, this isn't to condemn all promiscuity and all experimenting and in the innocence of growing older, or even in the a woman experiencing what she desires to experience with full intention and consent. We don't condemn that. The religions condemn that. We don't condemn that. We teach here how to run the feminine energy and how to understand how sacred and holy that energy is. The fallen energy of Mars that became carnal. And when the sexual current becomes carnal, we see war in the planet all over constantly. This planet is funded by that machine. Make no mistake, the wealth, every wealth eventually traces itself back in some way to war, to profiteering with war. So this is Aries. Aries is the sign of war. So we're just talking about the correspondences. Now, when we've been talking about in many of the videos how the light body Shakti and radiance of the Holy Spirit, the Vestal Virgins, is the true pure expression of that Mars energy as Holy Spirit, but also in a true union where the union of the masculine and feminine are in harmony and activating the tree of life. There is a regeneration of the Mars force because the carnal, the pure act of just the lower chakras, has been raised into love and wisdom and is therefore power. Now, I just want to say one more time we've all lived human lives and had generational programming and rebelled against perhaps organized religions and needed to go out and experience things, but to learn. Make no mistake, again, that keeps coming in. As we awaken and as we are initiated, we understand through our experience, lived experience is what initiates us. If we haven't lived an experience, we won't have the wisdom. Although we can read and watch films and look at Shakespeare plays. I talked about Macbeth I think it was the last video or the one before that. I played Lady Macbeth and got to experience the full personification of Lilith as the woman. We learn from that. We get to feel what it feels like, but then through wisdom and truth, we understand how to integrate that information so that we can expand and become the light body woman, the woman who doesn't shun her body or her physical vehicles, and even the physical dragon current is very important. In fact, many traditions shied away from it, and many occultists actually thought that they were above it, just above it, or were turned off to it, were even turned off to union because they thought it was impure and unholy. The very vehicle of bringing a soul to the planet was seen as somehow unholy. Even certain Essene sects and Gnostic sects as well. We've been talking about Gnosticism, and yes, this lineage, and I will be clarifying that later, has Gnostic origins, but also is deeply connected to the divine feminine Essenes, the feminine Christ Essenes, which carry this wisdom. but they shunned it as well. And many spiritual gurus shun it. We're at the stage now where understanding it will almost be the only way to because you can't integrate the information unless you have it. So now again, watching and reading can activate archetypes inside us, film and that's what film and art is for, to activate us. But then we have to live it. And in this lifetime, in the goddess epoch, in the age of Venus, it's not about saying I did it in another lifetime. That's not how it works this time around. You can't say I've had many lifetimes where I did this and now I'm doing this. We can say we've had many lifetimes, and I subscribe to that as well, and have even been sharing some of the deeper side, and I have a few more coming too. But the archetype of Christ carried through by Christ Jesus. Let's just take a moment with this. The one of the great archetypes of this era and this past cycle, which formed many of the Abrahamic religions. Christ came to this planet to teach the wisdom, to give the codes, to teach us and really embody forgiveness and serving each other, to move beyond boundaries, beyond prejudice, and to know that Christ is in every single human being. But he also had to complete the sacrifice physically. He had to suffer. He had to have the agony in the garden where he thought, I don't know if I can do this. Please, Father, if I'm not meant to go through with it, take this from me. But if I am, I will. But he was human. The masters experience very human inner conflict, even fear and sadness. They overcome it, but they have to come in as humans, and they carry out the sacrifice. Christ didn't come in to say, oh, way back at the beginning of creation, which is actually the real archetype, I was crucified. He came in to be crucified. Even though he was God in this tradition and as this archetype manifest, in the flesh, the word made flesh, he still had to be put up on that cross and be beaten, and he still had to carry the cross, which is the archetypal wisdom of being human, and be killed by his own, only to rise again. So we're just saying this, that your messy human life, your fears and your failings and your questioning the divine is part of this journey. That those who complete their journey and face these dark forces and hold them while keeping connected to the inner fire are carrying out an alchemy that is the most precious alchemy of this time. This time isn't about running away from those things, it's about reclaiming those things. So, the second part to the Forbidden City, this is the part that I hadn't heard before. So, the emperor also had what are called eunuchs. The eunuchs were the masculine men who came to serve as the palace menials, to do the small tasks, the spies, and to be the watchdogs of the emperor's consorts. They came to tattle on the women who were being kept for the pleasure and luxury of the emperor. Now, this struck me in a way it hit me so hard. This happened throughout the ancient world, by the way. There was an army of eunuchs that was attached to the Forbidden City, primarily to safeguard the imperial lady's chastity. There are so many streams that open up through this. It's unbelievable. It doesn't it all over the whole spectrum, the whole spectrum. There's this is not a liberal or conservative view. This is a female revelation. They had to inspect and keep safeguard their chastity so that none of the women were because all of these beautiful women that are these kind of young, vulnerable, beautiful, meaning like subtle. Their subtle energy was very, very feminine. They weren't, first of all, allowed to have any masculine power. They had zero. That was stripped. Their Mars energy gone. So they're babysat by eunuchs. The emperor's eunuchs were an army of eunuchs that were attached to the forbidden city. A eunuch is someone in a male vehicle who is hope I can say this word on YouTube, who is castrated and for various reasons. In certain lineages, it was to be pursue the holy lineage and to take away the fallen Mars energy. Okay. So we're taking away the agency that comes with our Kundalini fire and our sexual force. It's our power because it can manifest on the lower levels, the lower chakras, and it can rise into the heart, it can rise into the word, it can rise into the mind and the crown. It's meant to circulate through our body. It's lodged in the underworld in the lower three, but also in the underbelly of the heart, the which represents the shadow side of Pisces, Cancer, and Scorpio, the three water signs and archetypes. Now, okay, charge of heaven, employed as a chamberlain. Okay, I looked up eunuch. Now, this isn't, we're not bringing this up. It's not even a judgment, but it's an archetypal understanding that those men who gave up their own agency. Now, oftentimes these young men were also given by their parents because they came from a poorer class and they got to live at the palace and have were privy to many privileges that they would never ever have had coming in another caste, another class. So their parents oftentimes would give up a son and to receive some little rewards for having done so. And what the man got in return, he didn't have to work for the rest of his life. So you realize the poorer classes that were really kind of chained to work, hard labor, maybe even slavery. He got to be taken out of that world and given the high privileges without any work. Some were kept for spiritual purposes and some were, but it was the army. They were the babysitters of these consorts and concubines of the emperor. So when the women stepped out of place, it was one of these eunuchs that had revealed them and that had put them in the position of being very deeply, deeply punished. And I believe even their families could be punished. We see things like this also. Like I've heard stories, like even in North Korea, but all over. I know I can't go into this here, but I know about genuine systems like this that are happening right now. Real ones, not the conspiracy ones, even. I'm talking, it's genuinely still a way in certain countries where things operate. So the point about the eunuchs, there's something else there. Okay, is that it's important for both man and woman to claim spiritual power, their bodily power, and their agency, their power to self actualize and to speak out against injustice, but also not to hand our power over to someone else who doesn't love us and who's just giving us favors to be, the keepers of the dysfunction of the fallen forbidden city. You give up everything you have to keep the lower archetype in place. Now we see this, the archetype of, let's say, various priesthoods and this and that. I want to be really clear that I'm not trying to take down anything. And in fact, The whole synthesis of religion and feminine spirituality for me in my process is coming to a final realization, which I'll be announcing, just like what my final thoughts are after going through revisiting my own spirituality from my childhood religion that I was not just raised in, but very deeply educated in, and where I stand with it right now. So, again, this isn't to take them down, but when you have the male force telling the female force what she can and can't do, the authority of religion, the authority of spirituality. When you have the Christ without the feminine Christ, you have a world that will stay in the fallen archetype. In this world that we see it with the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. The subconscious mind is below. I just thought of the disciple Paul and how he talks about woman has to obey the man. I'm going to talk about what that really means. It's really esoteric. It really doesn't have anything to do with a female wife having to obey her husband. It's used that way all the time, especially in some of the more dogmatic and fundamentalist, idealist religions. It's actually the very opposite. The male and the female. We talked about this in the Vesica Pisces video. We talked about this in the very last video. I talked about Vesica Pisces and the balance of the female and the male being on equal standing create those two rings of Vesica Pisces, which opens the third portal of the Trinity. It opens that portal of Maiden Mother Crone and the flames of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. That's the divine Trinity. So let me see where I should go. All right. I want to say also that the women were required to crawl up to the foot of the bed to mate with the emperor. According to this website, this is not my own work, in this article called Forbidden City, they had to crawl on the floor and come up from I'm sorry, the foot of the bed to come onto the mating platform altar of the emperor. Unbelievable. Now, you know, in your own world, if you're with someone who you deeply love, you can play whatever you want to play. But when you are giving yourself to someone who could care less about you, you're just a pretty object. You're just flesh. You know, one of the high teachings in Christianity is that we've traded the kingdom of God for the kingdom of flesh. And part of that's true. I actually even heard, because I've been doing all this research the past couple of years, one of the popes said, which I thought was profound, and I think it was John Paul. He was, there's all different kinds of controversies we could go into, which I have my thoughts on, and I'll be talking about them later. But he said this, the way he spoke, it was so eloquent and profound. He said, we're meant to use objects and love humans. We're meant to use objects and love human beings. In our fallen state, we've learned to love objects and use human souls. That could not be any more connected to the Emperor's Forbidden City, to use them, to train. Now, we're going to talk about epigenetics after this, because it goes right into this. And I hope you're receiving this, because this is really deep. And this is so connected to the deep Kabbalistic work we're going to be doing in the Holy Descent. We have all the codes and we're ready. It's going to be just this sacred time on our planet when we're getting ready for so much change, for the feminine to really awaken, empower herself, become sovereign in her divine feminine energy, and be able to see with clear vision, clear intuition. We work with intuition as the pentagram of the Christos Sophia. It's It's the flaming Christ force that doesn't need to be told what to do. If she does something and decides to sacrifice or take an experience, it's because her own soul has guided her in that direction. And again, I just want to say, okay, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. It doesn't mean that women are perfect. We know that that's not the case. So in our state as well, we carry this epigenetic emotional body wound. We call them in the Art of the Feminine podcast, we talk over and over about the collective feminine wound. This is an intergenerational wound. We still retain that understanding of the virgin or the whore, but not the integrated woman, the priestess, the light body woman who is in touch with the entire cosmos. So I'll just go back to what he said. We use people. Think about everything we consume. And then the Goddess Report talks about this. All that we consume on social media, we're trained to use people without realizing it. When you look and scroll, I catch myself with this because my teachers are showing me every little detail of energy. And when I say teachers, I'm meaning the feminine masters that work with the Art of the Feminine platform. So we've learned to consume. Our desire body, consume. Last video, I talked about mining the feminine dimension. Those were the words that came in, mining the feminine dimension, and how technology is now 24/7 mining what you carry in your feminine, your power, your focus, your desires. A few images can, and now everything, there's so much celebrity everywhere. And in our programming, celebrities have a much higher status. They get almost like, it's like they get so much attention and they make so much money and have such glamorous lives. Nothing against that. I've worked in all those industries. I've lived in Los Angeles and New York City and worked in those industries in many different ways. And I know them. And they're some of the most beautiful, awakened, enlightened artists. Some film actors are seriously are seriously carry master energy. Their ability to convey the archetypes is totally connected to the divine. But the archetype of celebrity itself is what is used. They are also used. They're being used and they know it. That's why we've talked about over the past couple of years um how I'm getting intense here, how celebrities have to speak with a unified voice these days. It doesn't matter if it's the right or the left, they're kind of locked in a box. They have to go what's called lockstep if they want to work. Now, more and more people are kind of breaking out, and I'm not pushing a speaking up for this side or this side. I just mean the authenticity to really be able to say what you are seeing and processing in this world. That is why we reclaim the feminine Mars force. The feminine Mars force, as the Holy Spirit speaking in tongues through us, those tongues are the sunlight fluid, the solar energy that moves through our throat chakra, connected to our heart and our mind and our higher mind, that can speak truth. That is the true Mars force. In the Tarot, 16, the tower is Mars and it's a fire. And it's the letter pay, power, pay. It is connected to fire. It is connected to the mouth. And it's also connected to the high priestess and the hermit, showing that we have to go within to claim this power so that we can interface with the world. There was just something about the hermit. I'll come back to that in just a bit. So, okay. Let's look at a little bit at epigenetics. I think I said all. Okay, the eunuchs over. Oh, what's so funny is that. Oh my God, this is what's so funny. First of all, the eunuchs end up fighting amongst themselves, but they also end up overthrowing the dynasty. This is the whole. This archetype is so crazy. The ones who are taken out, who lose that agency, end up serving a different power that's cut off from their own. The idea that if you cut that off, that's an archetype, then you can go in and have spiritual energy. The archetype is correct, that there's times when we need to sublimate the lower sexual current, the lower chakras, so we can rise into the highers. We absolutely have to sublimate them. But the one who just gives it over for lust and pleasure of the material world ends up overthrowing the very thing that gave it power in the first place. We've got a lot to look at what's happening in the world right now. The true awakened human will understand how to integrate their power, use reason, which is Aries, to weigh things out, and really, really work from a place of wisdom, not from a place of identity politics or bipolar politics, like divisive politics, where I heard this saying, I can't remember, I just heard it. Oh, I know. I heard it from this philosopher. You cannot, if you are completely loyal to one party or another, and I've been honest about my political leanings lean are a bit more liberal. But if you're strictly loyal to one party, you cannot be authentic. You can't be authentically you because you've somehow contorted what you know and feel, and the mix of views you had and claimed obedience. You become a eunuch for one party or the other. That means I'm talking about people who are diehard, and I'm not talking about voting or having a favorite, not at all. But even politicians themselves, those who rise in to be their master energy in the goddess politics, will have to come into a more stabilized reality where it's okay, where you're not trying to only please corporate donors and lobbyists that completely own most of the voice of what comes out of these platforms. Even good people are subjected to and usurped and fall because of money. We use people and love things and wealth instead of loving humans and using currency to assist our spiritual awakening. And obviously there's a lot of battles right now, and there's definitely some things happening that I understand people coming out and really being passionate about it. It's not about not being passionate, but it's also with the feminine. The feminine has to, I've said this over and over, that the woman is being betrayed on both sides right now. And that's what I mean when I say that a lot of people who are in bed with the left, kind of the celebrity culture, can't fully speak the truth. And I know this personally from hearing of people that are really frustrated, that can see there's some things that are off. So, okay, now I'm going to tell one more thing. There's probably more to this story. The concubines and courtesans and consorts. Now, throughout history, there's times of really elevating the courtesans. The courtesans were deeply, deeply educated and sophisticated, beautiful women who could sit in the salons and converse with the learned men and really stimulate them. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's a part of it that is completely, I talked about the story of my sacral chakra and what was revealed when I did a really deep shamanic journey. And I had a shaman work with me, a really powerful one. And that is part of this wound for the collective. In my work, part of my contract was to carry part of that wound and to get to the bottom of it, like Inanna, to know the truth about everything with love and compassion, but also with strength. So now the epigenetic story is this. I saw this going around on, I think it was Instagram. I wrote it down. I probably can remember it. So it's this. Oh, here it is. Okay. There were mice that were in this program. These were scientific experiments where the mice were put in a cage. The mice were put in a cage and the door was left open. Every time the mice went to leave the cage, they were shocked. They got a literal electrical shock. And so one shock didn't stop them. They tried and kept trying. And eventually they stopped trying when it really sunk in. I will be punished if I leave my prison walls. So then they stopped trying to leave. These mice reproduced and had babies. The babies of the original traumatized mice that had been shocked were put in a different experiment, the same experiment. They were put into a cage where the door was left open. These mice, which were the children of the original mice that were shocked, did not even try to leave the cage. Through the programming of the mother's womb and her genetics, we talked about this in the last video, we pass down our fears and our bondage and our understanding of what the world is, what we are capable of, even our divine feminine potential. We work a lot here with the powers of woman, the spiritual power, through the witch hunts, the witch trials, the hangings, the drownings, the burning at the stake. We have given birth to generations that know that punishment. When we talk about the Inquisitions and the Crusades, was it the Cathars that on Friday the 13th that were obliterated in France as enemies of the church? There were so many of them. There's a really good YouTube video, by the way, about that. I haven't seen it in a couple of years, but it acts it out and talks about how they made the decision to go and just slaughtered the entire city of these who now, and there's different lineages and streams within them, but there was a core group that held the original teachings of the Christ and Christianity. This happened over and over and over. Now we fall into line generationally. I'm not promoting any specific conspiracy because it's layered, it's complex, and it's also human. The way war is human, competition, wanting to silence your what's a threat to you, that's natural. It happens in everything, not just in religion. It's human. It's the fallen Mars force. So for power, these mice did not even try to leave their cage. The gate was wide open. They had trauma, and they had the trauma response of these psychological wounds that were passed on through the womb. And so that, looking at the emperor's forbidden city and just what some people call patriarchy. I know that word can be used in a very aggressive and kind of like hysterical way. Sometimes when I see people using that way, I'm like, oh God, I would love to just take them in and say, let's sit down and talk for a minute about the shadow side and the archetype of what we called in the divine, in the Art of the Feminine podcast, what did we call it? The return of the divine masculine. And when we put that video out, I had not even seen, that was before the kind of the new trend of the divine masculine started. We received it through working deeply kabbalistically with the archetypes. And it's about the divine masculine, the divine emperor and the divine ruler and the divine warrior. Aries is the warrior and the warrioress. Aries is the alpha feminine woman. And so, okay, all right. Okay, I have this report. There's so much. Let me see how long I've gone. 139. Okay. I didn't want to go. This is my last long video. I was going to say last one was my last lecture, but then and I wanted to come on and do this for this full supermoon in Aries and for the course that's coming to bring out the correspondences for this archetypal activation. So, Golgotha. Let's look at the correspondences for the Emperor. I'm just going to look down and see. Yes, fire, show emotions. Okay. I have a notebook full of notes from your Light Body Woman course. Oh, thank you for letting me know that. Yeah, there's parts of that hold the living word. When we work in these containers, we're working with the living word. And so what that means is that when there's been years and years of study, integration, and activation and initiation, the words spoken are coming from the feminine Christ force. They're being spoken through the voice of Inanna. And so that those words can be living energy on the page. I've experienced this in ways that are profound, where the words actually almost change and come alive every time you look at them, especially handwritten. That's what I find for myself. When I write, because your hand connects to your heart and it also engages a part of your brain that's deeply imprinting your subconscious mind. So let's talk about Golgotha. Golgotha in Hebrew means place of the skull. Golgotha, which in the New Testament is where Christ was crucified, is the place of the skull. The Christ force in matter is crucified within our skull. We all have a Golgotha in our human body. Oftentimes in Renaissance art, you'll see Magdalene holding the skull, and that is a reference to Golgotha. You'll often also see her with a flame and the mirror. And so these esoteric codes, actually, the flame is Aries. The mirror is the deep, deep subconscious realms. And it also represents on another level the vanity of the shadow side of Venus, which is represented in the dark side of Pisces, which has the very same archetype as the mirror. The flame is I am, it's the Christ force. And so you're seeing this trinity of the crucifixion, the masculine, and the feminine, and their union. So the emperor, the archetype for Aries, and Aries governs the head. And it governs the light of the solar force in the head, in the mind, the higher mind, which is represented by the head. It represents reason, clear thinking. I am. Aries is also, and the emperor as well, you'll see the cross in the circle. So Aries is also, it happens during the vernal equinox in March. So at the time of Easter. So Aries itself and the religious holy day of Easter and the crucifixion of the Christ happens, and it's close to the spring equinox. So it's the beginning of the new year and the zodiac. It represents where we take our first step of being crucified, but it's also the power. Within every wound is embedded the power. The work here is to resurrect that power. So as the skull, Magdalene is showing that she is the solar goddess and that her archetype holds the secrets of the solar goddess. When we're talking about the emperor, the archetypal sign of Aries, the Hebrew letter Hashem, which is a very, very, very holy name, the name of the divine, which corresponds to also how Aries is I am. I am. So, in this deep masculine archetype, we have buried the power of the Christ, but we also have buried the feminine. Aries, as the number 4, Emperor. The Emperor is the archetype numbered 4, the number of the cross, but the number 4 is also the 4th chakra, which is the heart. And so here we have a very masculine archetype of the cross and the head. But the number 4, which is assigned to, represents the 4th chakra, the heart, and the 4th house in the zodiac is the sign Cancer, the sign of the divine mother. The number 4 has deep, deep esoteric correspondences on the mundane and on the physical level. 4 is suffering. Okay, just one moment. So we have the correspondence of the Emperor 4, the cross, Easter, crucifixion, the heart chakra, and the sign Cancer. The heart chakra also, if you see the image, the archetype of the rose cross, it shows that intersection of the masculine and feminine takes place, Aros Gamos, in the heart. There's a form of it in the head, but it takes place in the feminine chamber, meaning the masculine principle and the feminine principle mate in the heart. The vertical plane and the horizontal plane mate in the heart. So Aries already has a deep, deep correspondence with the feminine in the heart. This is Inanna. This is why we say this is the feminine Mars mysteries. If you watch Mars and the Mother Mary mysteries, in that video, you'll see that we talk all about how Mary comes in and as the divine mother and holds the virginal energy, the pure, unadulterated potential, totally pristine. And it's Magdalene that takes the initiations. Without the Magdalene, there is no resurrection. Without the feminine Christ, women are left inert of their own spiritual, divine, feminine power. And instead, we have suffering in love, suffering in motherhood. We give birth to those mice that don't leave the cage because they've been programmed. You can apply that wherever you want. It's applied to everything. So there was one last thing I wanted to say, just one moment. Oh. The fall traded, I wrote this down. The fall into matter. We traded spirit and soul for a human brain. This is really powerful. So we traded our spirit and our bowing at the altar of spirit for a brain. Now, the human brain, this is really connected to transhumanism, connected to all the things that are happening right now. We worship the brain, even in academia. The higher mind isn't even understood. And all these sort of like podcasts that are talking all about like, what's being researched about like, all the spiritual psychic powers. And you see, and it's mostly like comes across as being sort of military secrets and this and that. None of that is connected to the spirit. It's of the brain. And so all that research, as much as you might get, and if it's not attached to the Christ force, it is misused. Like everything, meaning the Christic force is the higher wisdom and truth. It's the truth. and it's used, and we glorify that. And you listen in the podcast, people lust after it. It's like, oh, no, I don't mean to be mean, but like, it's like, wow, they're doing that. And you usually see these big guys are like, yeah, we're doing that. And, we can, tell what's happening. Well, of course you can. And it's wonderful. There's nothing against anyone speaking out about these things. But the true powers, if they're not attached to the divine feminine archetype, they serve the lower kingdom. We say they serve the land of Caesar, the land of 3D, where everyone stays stuck and where we need technology to enhance our capabilities. Nothing wrong with technology. The technology is meant to happen. The human spirit reaches for the cosmos. It's the human impulse and the spiritual impulse to want to understand the planets and the stars and to even go there. That's spiritual. Our because it's a sign of our wanting to return to the great unknown or to the kingdom of heaven. And in a healthy way, that's very much drives us forward when we're also seeking it within, because there's a correspondence between the inner and the outer. We have to hold them in union. So what I wanted to say is in the archetypes, the brain is key 15. It's the devil. The brain is the devil, because and you see the masculine and feminine chained to the cube of matter. And I just thought of this going along with epigenetics. The chains are loosely in the Rider-Waite tarot, they're loosely around their neck. They could lift them up and walk away, and they don't. This is the programming of the underworld. We could walk away, and we don't. We're figuring it out, but we don't. We stay and we bow to the brain and temporal science, which is wonderful. It's a true scientist, the real scientists that are working on the Akashic level, record level, are receiving from the hierarchies. So what I want to say is that there are scientists, and even Einstein was deeply connected. He was in a human male body and interacted with the system, but his writings showed he was in contact with the hierarchies that are also, even with Kabbalah, it came from the hierarchies. It was given. And when we come into certain alignment, we're given the teachings of the whole universe, the universal. I could go on and on and on about, there's so much more, but I'm putting it in shorter videos. So the devil is key 15. Add 1 + 5 and you get 6. We always say this. 6 is the lovers and it's Venus. And what does that show us? The lovers, that the masculine happens through the heart. The integration of all of this and accessing the higher wisdom comes through love. It comes through sacred union. When we come into real, mature, by the way, in this 8-week course, we're going to be talking about reclaiming the mature feminine, which is the crone, the dark mother, and the depth of that battery polarity that's in the underworld, that is power. So when we come into the heart and we experience that interlacing, which is what we do every single time we do Solar Venus, every time we do I Am in the 7 Directions, that is the archetype of the lovers. That's what we're calling forth, and it's the activation of Solar Venus, Inanna, Magdalene, Lilith, when she's risen. Okay. Is there anything else? All right, let me see how much time I have. I have this written goddess report. I could probably skim through it because I remember there's actually some kind of controversial things in here. I remember I wrote it about a week ago. Let me see here. The descent of the queen, the solar queen. All right. Okay. I'm gonna kind of skim through it and see how much I want to read. I'm here to talk about woman's wealth. Oh, what we're reclaiming is talking about the wealth of the feminine. When women no longer have to be on subsidies and be getting things from people on the outside, when they can repower their own goddess force, their own holy womanhood, things are going to change very fast. That's what this is about. But they will power it with truth, with a capital T. The power of her divine feminine energy, spiritual power. She's reclaiming her word. We hear about women's rights as, oh, okay. I see where I went with this. Just one second. This is basically what I was going into because all politics right now is based on political issues, political things that have to do with women's reproductive health. Huge, huge. Because this whole platform started with fertility, we absolutely believe in what we teach here is the sacredness and sanctity of the dragon current, what we just talked about at the beginning of the video. When you know that's sacred, your chances of even having to confront something like that will change. It will be it will virtually disappear and we'll have new understanding. I'm going to talk about the child in the womb in another video because I have a few powerful things I could say about that and conception. But politics harnesses this because they mine the feminine energy for their support. Even by not codifying certain things, they remain on the election table every single election. Why? Because it's the number one way to get female votes. Women have to start voting for themselves and voting for their children. Now, right now, without just to disclose where I stand, I will say that I absolutely believe in the right of females to make decisions about their own body. I will say that. There are various stages that this becomes much more karmic and much more of a violation. And we can talk about that at another time. But in a healthy society, modern, since the beginning of time, while we're learning and growing and while we're understanding things, that women's rights needs to be honored. That is a slippery slope. When that goes, watch how fast everything else goes. In fact, mark my word, if that goes, certain things will happen that will bring back the old energies. It's really touchy. I believe in having better education and not flaunting these things as if they're no big deal because they are a big deal. However, I don't believe in taking that away. Okay. Yeah. So I started to talk about how women need to just understand their own energy and their own love. Who do you give yourself to? If you're mating with someone who does not love you or who would not choose you, you might, as you awaken, start to go deeper with the understanding of how you use your body. And again, if you're a mature woman, you're capable of making decisions for yourself. And if you choose to experience something for the joy and the fun, that's okay. That can still eventually lead to deep, deep. What happens is we deplete our force when we mate with someone that doesn't love us. It's an energetic reality. That is an energetic reality. And a man that constantly seeks out women just for lust and pleasure is completely taking his Mars force into the underworld. It's a big problem in this world. So, and he is depleted of his spiritual God force. We have to learn the balance on these things. Okay, so woman holds a very sacred feminine energy. This was the most central theme of the 65 episodes of the Art of the Feminine podcast. This energy is the most valuable force on the planet. If you listen to that podcast, you heard me say this many, many times. This is a substance that we give. It's literally part of our vital energy, but it must be nurtured, protected, and guarded by the Lord, and otherwise, this power is controlled, manipulated, and siphoned by the lords of lust. So I invite you to just step back. This isn't political, this is spiritual. Because all spiritualities are profaned. They're profaned and used to serve the lower kingdom, and they're not meant to be. Okay. The lords of lust. Woman is fooled into selling herself to a bidder who has not one care for her soul. This creates the bondage of future generations. And I want to say something. I recently saw a podcast. And again, this is not to judge, it's just to hold wisdom. I recently became aware of a podcast that's watched by the number one podcast for women in the world. And because I'm busy and doing my own thing, I used to watch some of the podcasts, and when the guy podcasters started coming out, like in 2018, 19, I kept up and I still check in because there's a lot of voices coming through. But this podcast I had, it's more fluffy. But it's about the feminine, it's about women, but I hadn't watched it. So I became aware of it and realized it's huge. And so I thought, oh wow, I'd like to see what women are watching. And so I went and started scrolling through, and I have to admit, I literally had to sit there for about an hour and just say, okay, this is the number one thing that women in popular culture are consuming. Part of it is kind of breaking out of the old patriarchal norms of how a woman could, interact with people. But at the same time, it's coming from the lack of spiritual maturity of the divine feminine. And it's just saturating the world with this like OnlyFans type content. That's what it is. This new push where the high school girls are on OnlyFans, and it's just okay now to sell your body on a camera. And then we have male influencers that push that to men and say you could use these women and get really rich and have your own harem. No, no, not from the vantage point and from the deep inner core of the Sophionic wisdom, the divine feminine wisdom. So it's just things are going to change because the clash, even between conservative and liberal, is going to take down a lot of people. It won't even matter. There is, if you're on this side or that side, the trauma on the nervous system of the human race and the misuse of the goddess force, let's call it the goddess force for this part of the video, are going to take everyone. It's the fire. That's the tower of Mars. It's the fall of the word. It's what will deconstruct and it will just break everything down. That's the fall. That's what happens when that force, when we reach a peak and we're still headed in that direction. That is why this time right now, when the North Node transit goes into Pisces, all of that's on the table. Pisces is the darkest iteration of the sexual force. We talked about it. It's the dark moon of Lilith. Our planetary North Node, meaning the point of focus, is going to be in Pisces. And we think we've seen some crazy things. We're just getting started. So now is the time. This is what I want to finish with, and then I'll look at this and see. I'll save this for them. In fact, I'm going to go live on Instagram really soon. I keep saying I'm going to do that, and I'll save this for that. This is what I want to say to close this out. Now is the time when you have to find your spiritual home, anchor in, and be selfish. Say no to all the other things that are just mining your power. The technology is mining your wealth. Bring it back in the direction of you and your spiritual power, growth, regeneration, ascension. Otherwise people will go crazy. I already can tell if I scroll too much, I get clear indications when I should stop. And sometimes I'll go a little too much and I'm like, oh, whoa. There's a certain point where those serpents jump out and get inside you. And then you have to purify. You have to go out in nature. You have to shake it off. You have to listen to music, dance, do whatever you can to reclaim your focus, because what's happening is, like the epigenetics, like the mice being programmed, we're getting shocked. Don't step out. Don't turn off technology. Don't turn off social media. Don't stop looking at other people. Don't stop consuming what the politics are telling you. And every time we get a shock saying, don't stop, don't go inward, then we are carrying that program. So the real strength and power of the alpha feminine, we call it sometimes light body alpha feminine. When I teach the light body women mentorships, you have to be in your power. That's why I wore red today. I never wear red. Red is the color of Mars, and red is the color of Gibora and of the Shakti. Don't let the fallen angel of Mars rule you. Reclaim the divine mother. Have boundaries, and you will feel so much better. I have another thing to talk about that I saw. I just saw on a podcast yesterday on Instagram. Okay, when you make decisions for yourself, this was on a guy podcast who I don't follow all the time, but I saw it and I was like, yeah, I like this. He was talking to a neuroscientist, when you use the power of your will and when you use discipline and when you do something that's a little bit hard, they use the example of like going on a diet and sticking with it, working out, committing to a project. This is so, and I think it was a hypothalamus. I forget which it was, that gets bigger. When you commit and use your power, this is the power of Inanna. This is the power of Aries in the feminine. And you focus your work. This is one of the things we're working on. I believe it's written on the page in the Inanna 8-week descent. You get stronger and stronger. So this isn't about the old, how women in the 60s were inclusive. Oh, just get rid of that. Don't worry about your body. Just be free. We needed to break out. But I can tell you right now, in this era, you're going to have wisdom, discipline, power, strength, and courage. Just what's coming even in the next few weeks, we don't know. There could be major, or it could take until the North Node enters into Pisces. Be specific about how you use your time, unless you're in a creative moment and you need to sort of let it go everywhere. Be very specific. Have a real spiritual practice. Even if it's a religion, the religions are kind of have the political built within them, but you can practice any one of these religions and practice it as a holy feminine if you're called to it, and you can still go to the jewel of that. And you go, there's some really good apps out. Go someplace where you feel holy, where you feel peaceful and held, and where those lower impulses of revelation, inspiration, and intuition can rise and become known to you as the living word. Do it now. Do it now, because as technology and AI are amping up, there'll be less willpower. Our willpower will be mined. This is flat out known. The books, somebody asked me about the books, and I mentioned the writer Yuval Noah Harari, who's a historian who wrote some really powerful books about technology. I gave them to my son for Christmas a few years ago. He read all of them. He was like, oh my God. Just because he's a visionary of what's coming. A lot of people have said a lot of bad things about him. Who knows what's really, I mean, he's in the masculine consciousness for sure. And then we could go on and on. But as a visionary that brought this forward so we can see it, there's just a lot of writing about how deeply technology will be right inside your subconscious mind, controlling what you think, where you look, how you act, what you agree to. So self-sovereignty right now is more important than anything else. I just looked at the very first Light Body Yoga flyer. It was a paper flyer back in the day that I taught. And on that list of bullet points, I might photograph this and put it on Instagram. It was claiming your sovereignty. It was, and back then it didn't even have the deepest meaning that it has for me now. But the sovereignty is the sovereignty of your imagination, the sovereignty of your thoughts, and the sovereignty of your desires. So that you're not desiring everything, but you're desiring what takes you to your God self. Then you can interact and interface with anything. And have fun, because this is also going to be a time of craziness and fun. For those who know what's going on, it'll be like, okay, there's going to be some laughs and there's going to be a lot of tears. So let me just go through this really quick and see if there's anything. Oh, the last thing I will say, this fear. The last thing I want to say, the fallen Mars force is fear. FEAR. That word corresponds to the tower. It's the inverted Mars force. Whenever this will, I'll close. The reason to pray is because it neutralizes fear. Prayer and holy sacred music. Oh, you want to feel just like God is holding you, and then it neutralizes fear. The reason a lot of people are becoming like born again or finding religion, just like when you go to a 12-step program, when you trust and say, I give myself to the divine, which in some, I think Course in Miracles, it's giving yourself to the Holy Spirit, not making any decisions without that. When you do that, you all of a sudden you're like, I'm going to be okay. But when we have fear, fear can take us to the well, but then we have to drink. Fear takes us that a lot of people are like, oh my God, it's so bad right now. What should I do? And they're find something, but then you have to drink it. You have to drink the wisdom. Wisdom is water. And when you do, the hangman is surrender. It's trusting. Let go and let God, let the divine. That is true enlightenment. And that's also the archetype of Neptune and Pisces. And that's the way to neutralize the dark feminine that's coming in with the North Node transiting in Pisces, the suffering that's coming. So just going to take a moment and going to ask all of you to make an intention for the Aries full moon. Just going to have you take a moment. Think about the biggest fear that's driving you, that's lodged in the subconscious mind. I just remembered I was going to say about the disciple Paul. The disciple Paul was receiving on the higher plane, the etheric teachings, and what it means that the woman obeys the man is that it means that the subconscious mind obeys the conscious mind. Aries represents the conscious. This is beautiful how it all came together because he talks about, and Christians and people will quote it as woman has to obey her husband. In mysticism, the woman is the subconscious mind and the man is the conscious mind. So the woman becomes obedient to the conscious mind. What that means, the conscious mind, the higher mind is Aries. It's the solar force. It's I am. And it means that when you bring your deep subconscious mind under the command of your masculine principle, sometimes we refer to it as the magician, your subconscious mind will serve you. That's the true meaning of Lilith, too. The fallen Lilith didn't want to serve Adam. Adam is the mind, but it's also the lower mind. So the true archetype of Lilith is to serve the Christ force. And Lilith is the subconscious mind. We correspond her with Pisces. She's the subconscious dark mother. When that force is in service of the Christic force, we say the solar feminine Christ force is born. And so I just ask you to think of the one thing that you know you're deeply afraid of. Is it a competition? Is it a failure? Is it about your physical body? By the way, we're going to work a lot with the female empowerment around aging when we do this. Because if you're not afraid of age, you have the power of the crone on your side. There's nothing wrong with wanting to look beautiful and keep yourself, but the fear of aging is debilitating to the global feminine. It's one of the greatest collective feminine wounds. The crone will take care of that for you. She's going to wipe it off your radar and replace it with something new. Choose your fear and offer it to be sacrificed. As we know, Aries represents the time of crucifixion. Sacrifice it on the holy altar of the divine and let it be replaced with strength, with courage, with humility, with the understanding of who you really are and what you're meant to be doing at this time. We offer this at the Aries full moon. In this culmination, we ask that there be a global healing with the fallen Mars impulse. And I ask that that healing happen within you as well, that you reclaim the flame of Magdalene, the mirror of Magdalene. You claim the holy tomb at Golgotha as the resurrected Christ force in your own being. And so we bow with amen, amen, amen. And I I say to you, namaste. I forgot to say this, but I ask that you subscribe to this channel. Make sure to subscribe. I promise I have some short videos that are coming. Um, this will kind of be the last of the long form lectures. I do have a Q&A planned before the election, which we'll get to really talk. It's rare that I do that, that I talk about what's some of the more patriarchal things that are going on, but I'd like to do a Q&A before the election and talk about it. Um, but subscribe and make sure to hit notifications so you get notified when I upload videos, which I'll be doing. And I would so appreciate it if you give the video a like. And if you have any groups that you could share it with that could benefit from this, please share. And also, I love the correspondences we've had in the comments. So please come back and comment. So I'm going to take a peek down and just see who's here. And if there's any last questions, you can feel free to. I have a Q&A coming next Wednesday for those who are in my school and for some of those who have done courses this year. So I just want to put that out there. If you're watching and you've done it, we're going to do a big Q&A. It will be private for those people who are members in the school. Okay. All right. Fascinating. So much sacred union and divine love messaging coming right now. Oh, I'm glad you're receiving it. Does anybody else want to comment? The links for goddess. So the focus of the course that we're doing is goddess ritual. So this work, we are built in. Oh, thank you, Juliet. Ah, I love your name and I love the spelling. Love it. Romeo and Juliet. She is a great archetype of feminine power and love and self-determination. That's someone who chose for herself. The archetype Shakespeare is so amazing. So we're going to be working with ritual in a really powerful way. So goddess ritual is how we call forth the powers. And although this is like holy pagan holidays, I work, as most of you know, I work with the Christ force. I come from that lineage and I bow to that lineage. I bow to the lineage of the Christ, the cosmic Christ, the inner Christ, and the holy teachings. And I might say that we bring the feminine side, the feminine Christ side to this wisdom, because now is the time that it's coming into our full. It's helping to make the shift that will fly around this planet when it's time. It's going to really come in the new era, in the goddess epoch. Okay, thank you, Cheryl. Oh, you're so welcome, Cheryl. So nice to see everybody. And I look forward to, again, the links to sign up for the course are below. And I will see you next time. Happy full moon in Aries. Namaste.